Welcome to a fresh, new, full experience series. This is the show that slices and dices up a TV series to get a different view of the entire run by only watching 4 episodes. We watched the first episode. We watched the ultimate episode, the highest rated one. We watched the lowest episode, the worst one, according to IMDb. And we watched the last one. We see how it all wraps up, and we get an interesting view of how these series works. Today, we are kicking off our view of The Shield with episode 1 pilot from March 12, 2002. I'm Tom Merritt. He's Brian Brushwood.
Hey man, this has been, I've made a lot of laps on this one, but one of my favorite was the first time I bullied you into watching the entire series of The Shield.
That was like several years worth of spoiler in time, or spoiler zones, was watching The Shield, wasn't it?
Yeah, wait, maybe 2, well, I guess what, 50 per year, 50, yeah, so if it was around 100 episodes for the whole run. I remember I felt like when we stopped watching The Shield for spoiler, and that I was like, I guess there are other shows. Yeah, well, that was the beginning of us starting to realize, we have to have like one archive thing. Were you able to watch the finale live with everyone else? Was that one that you caught up, or you watched it all?
No, it was already done
finished?
by the time I finished. Yeah.
And
I have only watched it that one time. For our purposes. I did not go back and rewatch it since. Until now.
I'm going to look up real quick when it premiered. But meanwhile, part of the reason that we punted on covering this one up until this week was
I just gave the date, March 12th, 2002. So
2002. Okay.
Yeah. So 2009 is when the last season came. So you've watched it how many times?
I don't know. Yeah, the whole run twice. But like the pilot is so good. I remember the first time I watched it was because my friend CJ Johnson, we were on a tour bus. It was 2003, summer 2003, because I was on tour with Brooks and Dunn and Rascal Flatts and Brad Paisley. And CJ was like, "You got to watch this show. Just watch one episode. Just watch one episode." And so we traded. I made him watch an episode of Cowboy Bebop. He made me watch the first episode of The Shield, and that was what got me hooked. It is among pilot episodes, and I guess among pilots, maybe one of the best pilots ever. In my opinion. But before we dive in too deep and spoilery, one of the most wonderful things is somebody who hasn't seen it for the first time. Amos, give us your review of this episode.
So I actually watched this with my wife, who had also never watched it before. So I can report 2 opinions.
Well, and going into it, what were your expectations?
I thought it would be something like The Wire, where it's a long arc, full of small chapters that each had their own buildup and development and conclusion, but an overall large story, which may be what it is. It's hard to tell that from one episode, but it's very different than The Wire. very, very different experience.
And the 2 programs ran concurrently as well, and they thematically they're very similar in that they portray the complexities of being a police officer and the blurring of the lines between good guy and bad guy, etc.
Yep. About halfway through, my wife and I paused it during one of our lovely commercial breaks. Thank you, Hulu. And we were like, well, so is this just going to be like a long series about a bunch of racist cops? And like my wife was like,
thanks for watching the full experience.
But she was like, so the black lady doesn't like any of the Mexicans. The Mexican guys or the Hispanics, they don't like any of the white dudes, and the white dudes seem to hate everybody, even themselves. And I was like, that's not far from what I got from this so far either. So we were like, she was like, I would never watch this on my own. She actually said, you need more brown TV on your full experience.
I'm here for it. I'm absolutely here for that.
But yeah, she was concerned. She was like, this is not something, because I told her, this is something we're going to watch. She's here now. I don't know, in case the Cordkillers audience doesn't know, my wife finally moved back to Alaska. So, going forward, full experiences will probably likely have her involved. And I was like, well, this is something we do, and you can watch it with me. And about halfway through, she was like, I don't know if I want to watch this. I don't know if I want to ever watch another episode of this ever again. And then by the end of the episode, well, just a few minutes before the end of the episode, we were both like, okay, there's something here. There's more than just, your good cop, bad cop, racist tropes and all that kind of stuff. Like there's something more going on here that we're kind of liking. And then once the episode ended, we were both like, what? Huh? It was a genuine surprise, and I saw it coming about 2 seconds before it happened.
Yeah.
And anytime you can surprise me, I'm not like a mental seer of movies, but it does take a little bit to surprise me, thematically or with an event like that. It surprised me, genuinely surprised me.
You could say what the event is. We are spoiling it.
Yeah. The blatant murder of the cop that was trying to you probably know his name better than I do, but the guy Terry, yeah, that was trying to, try to get in good, and it didn't even want to necessarily get in good with anybody, with the feds, stuff like that, trying to do the investigation, the internal investigation, but had gotten there, and he was the sacrificial cop when things went wrong on the raid.
Yeah. So the couple things. First of all, I don't speak Hollywood too well, but from what I understand, the big deal that was a big shock was that they burnt, because credits matter so much in Hollywood or whatever. They put that dude in the credits as a full cast member, and whatever social capital or money capital that cost to do it. Whatever agent, made a payday on it, they did that just so that they would preserve. And spoiler alert for the rest of the series, it ain't like the actor comes back to do a bunch of recreations or to be a ghost of himself or nothing. Like, they made him a full cast member just so they could kill him off, just so that what they were aiming for on all this was the moral ambiguity of like you said, the old trope of like good cop, bad cop and all that stuff. That was the tagline. He literally says like, good cop and bad cop took a break. I'm a different kind of cop. And you're like, I get it. You're morally gray. But then that twist at the end where the straight up murder, unrepentant, and you're like, oh, no. The main character of this cop show is straight up an evil bad guy. He's condemned and damned from the beginning. And later...
But also sanctified, because even just the scene before that, before the raid, the one guy that was trying to get him, the lieutenant was like, well, I want you to go handle this for me. Going against everything that he'd gone for that entire... Like, there's so many layers of moral ambiguity in this one episode. It kind of kept me going through a loop of thinking I knew what was going on. And
you're right, because we do get a Crusader vibe from Acevedo, but then we see his facade crumble when the rubber meets the road of there's a little girl that needs to be rescued. He's like, I don't know what else to do. I have to unleash the beast. And then you see Claudette give him an accusing stare of like, you don't know what you just did. Yeah. And then you also get a little bit in Claudette, seems to be the one gosh danged professional in the whole bunch. But then they tip at the end that she was the one that put the dog poop in Dutch's in Dutch's desk. And so it's like everybody's got some schmutz on them, man.
Yep.
Yeah. Terry, the guy who played Terry, his name is
Reed Diamond.
Reed Diamond had been main character in Homicide: Life on the Street in the 90s. And I think right before that, he's been in other things since
Homicide: Life on the Street was the same guy who did The Wire, the same, was it David Simon?
Yeah, and he was also in Judging Amy right before he was in The Shield. So it was believable that like, oh yeah, that guy would be a main character in The Shield, right? He's done this kind of work before. He's worked with David Simon. Yeah, of course they're going to cast him. So it was, even in the context of 2002, even more compelling that they're like, wait, what? and like Brian said, I don't think it's much of a spoiler to future episodes to say, if you ever see him again, it will be flashbacks to this episode, right? It's not going to be new stuff. Like we're pretty much just we've seen all we're going to see. And what struck me about watching this the second time is how much of this would have been 2 or 3 seasons in another show.
Yeah.
We see the entire arc of Aceveda from like, no, I will stand strong and change things, to like, damn it, when it comes down to it, I want to save the girl, so I'll compromise. And that's Mackie's whole thing of like,
it took 3 seasons on The Wire to get that out of
right?
of Tommy Carcetti.
Exactly. Aceveda does it in 1. And Mackie, that's Mackie's whole point, is like, yeah, you need me. Because you want to do the right thing, and to do the right thing, you have to do the wrong thing. That's Mackie's character. And instead of slowly showing us, oh, I get Mackie, and building up to something horrible, they're like, let's just have him do the worst thing possible right at the end of this first episode, and that will now dominate his storyline from here on out.
Yeah, and also to drive it home, they do the flashback, as he dies, which I think medically it is possible to be conscious a little bit long enough to have thoughts when you've been shot in the face, at least according to the documentary regarding Henry. But they flash back to all of those chummy moments of cop camaraderie that Mackie was engaged in, as if to drive the point home of like, nope, this guy is the darkest sociopath you could possibly imagine. And what's great is, hopefully, Amos, the one thing you're thinking right now is, well, how are they going to get him? Like, he's damned from the beginning. Like we all know what our job as viewers is. We all have to root to get him now, right? And yet, episode by episode, season after season, the Mexican standoff just gets better and better and better. It's a really good chess game where just when you think like, oh, no, it's hosed, finally the trap's closed, you see another thread that implicates another person in another bit of the tangled web. It is a joy to get so twisted up watching it.
I'll tell you what, what I got from this episode, if I were to sum it up, I got an Training Day condensed down to 45 minutes with so many threads left to follow.
Mm-hmm.
That's the feel that I got from this.
Yeah. I think that's pretty fair.
I mean, and that's one of my favorite movies of all time. So it was great to have that at the realization at the end of it, like, oh my God, I just watched an episode of Training Day.
Well, and Training Day came out after or while The Shield was in full force, full swing. So it wouldn't surprise me if the critical success of The Shield paved the way. Keep in mind, there's a fantastic book called Difficult Men that talks about the golden age of TV when you had The Wire, The Shield, The Sopranos, and Mad Men, when largely due to structural changes, you were allowed to have very complicated protagonists that disappointed in many ways. And so in the case, also Breaking Bad. And in fact, Breaking Bad is portrayed as a good person who descends into being a bad guy. Weirdly, this is a mirror image of it, where it's like, we know exactly where we stand with Vic Mackey from episode 1. And that makes it all the more painful to give us episode by episode little what feel like redemptive moments that make it very unpleasant as a watcher.
And you get a little taste of that when he's like, it's weird how he says, get some soup, get him some soup. Why soup? I don't know. That always stuck out to me. But they are showing him in a sympathetic light. He is not trying to take advantage of this person as an informant. He is trying to help them. He is literally trying to keep someone off the street. And he has a fairly normal looking home life, at least in the scene that we see.
Well, that was one of the things my wife actually brought up, was like, is this in Boston? I was like, no, it's in LA. She was like, do people have houses like that in LA? And I was like, only the really wealthy people have houses with a big pool and all the different stuff and the big house and everything. Like that's not a normal cop's pay. And she was like, I thought so.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
That is a fact to note.
Yeah, because having grown up down in that that region, she was leaning on me for that, and I was like, I didn't think about it until she said it, and I was like, that's I see what you're, I see the weed you're pulling there. All right,
yeah. There's some dated stuff in here. I feel like the wagon box stuff didn't age as well. It would be written differently if it were taking place now.
Yeah.
Stealing VCRs from Circuit City of its time. Kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, the dude in the straw hat, the old timey flim flammer, that belonged to, I don't know, 68, 69 or so.
Yeah.
It seemed like a very intentional anachronism. Just throwing that in there to another way to keep you morally ambiguous on the whole story.
I suppose,
just little tidbits here that doesn't fit the internal narrative, and maybe it didn't fit the show as just a one-off. But for as a first-time viewer, I was watching going, that doesn't fit where I thought this was going to go, and I want to know more about how that became a thing.
Dialogue is just killer though. Like this. The writing on this show is just amazing, and the acting, the delivery.
It's very tight. It's very tight. There are certain parts of the conversation where if I didn't have subtitles, I wouldn't know what they were saying because the dialogue is very punchy. It's boom, 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 boom. But the flow is like even if you didn't know exactly what they were saying, you would be able to catch the flow and follow the conversation thematically, and that to me is always a plus.
The production Brian, number one, you get some really great views of, they clearly needed just reaction shots from the beat cop, what's her name, and so it's like in her sunglasses you see reflected the tripod and the whole crew standing around on what clearly is a different set. But also this was one of the very first straight to HD shot shows. And you could tell that the format was new. It allowed them to do things that you couldn't do before, like shoot in very tight spaces. And this is one of the first shows that you really notice camera work as a character as well. Clearly, the person running the camera knows the script, and they've rehearsed the beats because the camera punches in. They're like, dialogue part 1, dialogue part 2, camera zooms in, dialogue part 3, and it's like it's this choreographed dance to cover up the fact that they had brand new HD cameras and they didn't want it to look too clean. Boy, oh boy, did they lay the artificial film grain on thick, and it didn't age well. Some of the sets, this is the first time I watched this, Tom, and didn't get so lost in the story that the spell was cast. And it's every time I've watched it before, it hasn't felt like these are actors saying dialogue. It's felt like I was there, and it didn't feel that way this time. But then again, this is my 6th time to watch it.
Yeah, it can't last forever. If you
it's been 22 years, you know.
I did notice that anytime they were shooting inside the police station, which the barn. It's like a converted house. It's awful.
A church.
It's a church that comes up like they converted a church, and they gave it all those character things.
So anytime they were shooting in there, it was a handheld shaky cam shot. So it felt like you were actually in that small space with them. And then on the outside, when they were having shots on the outside, even if they were doing close-ups of dialogue, it was steady cam. It was very blocked, very deliberate. Whereas again inside the church, it was the walking wobble was there as you were following the conversation, as if you were in the room with them following it along. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that about halfway through. I was like, that's a distinction they're doing in this episode, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, when they also did like the crazy chasing, they actually were running through tchotchke shops and so on.
Right.
Also, for a split second, I was like, wait a minute. First of all, Farmington doesn't exist, but we all know it's like somewhere around South LA. Like it's kind of supposed to be down there. And I was like, why is Aceveda meeting in Echo Park then? And then it hit me like, oh, right. Because he wants to be far away from Farmington. So that weird geographic jump that only makes sense to somebody who lives in the place where it's being shot. Actually, I was like, oh, you know what? That's clean. They would go as far away as possible. Yeah.
kudos on the stolen shot of just, happening to be there for lawn maintenance, or them cutting down the palm trees and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I also thought it was a really cool shot when they're actually at the very end, when they were starting the raid, they're, getting ready to their ladders and everything else. And you can see Dodger Stadium down below them.
Yeah.
Down the hill. I was like, oh, yeah.
And a game. They shot it when there was something happening at Dodger Stadium. I presume a Dodger game. Yeah.
Right. It was very deliberately placed there to make sure that oh, yes, I am in the LA foothills.
Also, kudos to the unironic enjoyment I had of Kid Rock's Ba Wita Ba.
Yeah. Soundtrack of its time as well. Indeed.
Very, very much so. Yeah.
So next time we're going to jump ahead. This is going to be interesting for Amos, because the ultimate episode, the highest rated episode, is the second to last episode, season 7, episode 12. So we're going to jump almost all the way to the end.
Now,
for the
here's
ultimate.
I guess the agony is, and I know the answer as I asked the question, but the question is, do we give them any help going into it, or do we got to stress test the full experience?
Got to stress test the full experience. The only option we have would be to do lowest next instead of ultimate. We have the latitude to make it the full experience if we wanted to.
No, I say we stick with the full.
Okay, we will not have a full experience, and then we'll go back to season 4, episode 2, and then we'll finish up with the episode after the ultimate episodes, episode 13 of season 7. So
this is the one, Tom, where the last episode was the highest rated, right? And then
right. And our policy is always like the pilot and the finale are exempt from ultimate and lowest, right?
Right.
If they are the highest or lowest rated, we go to the next highest or lowest rated.
So this is the circumstance that we theoreticized back at the beginning of the full experience as a pet project. And it's finally here in our face. So this will be interesting.
Oh, you know what? This will also, I actually think you're going to be okay on this, Amos, because I believe you'll get a 2-minute plus previously on going into it. This is around the time 2009 would be the very beginnings of the art form of the previously on, where it's like, make sure to, nudge people to remind them of the right things going into it.
Yeah. I'm trying to see, actually, is it a 3-part? Like, are we coming in the middle? Because wasn't episode 11? No. I'm wrong. No, never mind. That is not. It's just 12 and 13. Okay. Well, there you go, folks. That is our talk on the first episode of The Shield, season 1, episode 1 pilot. The ultimate episode is next, season 7, episode 12. Possible kill screen. So watch that, then come back to hear us discuss it in the next episode of The Full Experience. You get these episodes earlier if you're a patron. Go check that out, patreon.com/Cordkillers. We'll talk to you next time.